Good morning. It is 6:22 a.m. on Tuesday, February 23rd, 2016. I'm Christiana Ellis and I just got up. This is 5 more minutes. Part of my getting up process this morning involves laying on the floor for about 5 minutes near the spot where Luna had been when I laid down, but then she walked away unimpressed and I kind of just stayed there for a little while. Oh, God. Coughing into the microphone is always a good look. Or sound, whatever. Uh, Trying to go to bed early is a difficult proposition sometimes with this little dog here. If she feels like it's not bedtime yet, she often feels the need to lay in bed right next to me and continue to bark at any noise that happens. But, it's fine. So I've caught up a little bit on my sleep from Sunday night and need to work on that a little bit more. So I think today I'll talk a little bit about finding music for podcasts and how sometimes it can be tricky in a number of different ways. So first of all, like what I've typically done in the past when I'm looking at, I've done quite a variety of things. Like, so for example, in the Nina Kimberly, the Merciless podcast, I had theme music that I got from a royalty-free service called cssmusic.com, where I basically just paid money to have the royalty-free music. Now, I'll confess that I didn't at the time pay super close attention to like the actual terms and conditions beyond the idea that, well, this is royalty-free. And what I'll add too is that like some of what we're talking about, or what I'm going to talk about in this one in terms of just the different versions of licenses and all that, it's the sort of stuff that unless you really start making a lot of money, probably nobody cares. You know what I mean? It's like the odds of anyone actually coming after me if I didn't quite use the license properly, very, very low. Unless, of course, something went viral and then all of a sudden there's a lot of attention on it. But all things considered, I think it is worthwhile on the podcaster's part to try to get that stuff right if he can. So so by contrast, one of the things that I've done with other podcasts, including music from Space Casey, for example, is I went to a now defunct website called the PodSafe Music Archive, PodSafe Music Network, that was owned by Podshow for a while, and then now has seemingly kind of vanished. And the whole idea of that website was to be sort of a place where musicians who are interested in having their songs released via Creative Commons licenses or other can do so there. Now that website has gone away, but now there's a couple of other replacement websites. One is called the Free Music Archive. The Free Music Archive is a similar concept where you have all of these musicians who put their music up there with a variety of different licenses, and that's one of the things that's, I don't want to say tricky there, but basically the music that's on that site, it will vary from one song to another what licenses are available with them. And so when I'm looking for music for the podcast version of Phyllis Esposito, in addition to having to just pick a song that I like, which is a whole other thing, you have to figure out, okay, well, what's going to be available, especially because as I'm still considering a Patreon, there's several elements to a Creative Commons license. There's the idea that are derivatives allowed, and in my case they would have to be, because what I'm planning is to use the music in part of a bigger production, to play the beginning and end, talk over it a little bit, that sort of thing. So that would be what's called a derivative work, and means that the license made available for any given song has to allow derivatives. And some of them don't. And so a non-derivative license would be like if you're saying, well, if you have a music podcast that you just play full songs in their entirety, you could potentially use that song, but don't remix it. Don't, chop it up or do other things to it. Then there's also the idea of non-commercial. And this is one that's a little bit tricky for my use. Non-commercial would typically just mean you can make a derivative work, but you can't then charge for that derivative work. Meaning, I'm making my song available for free, but that means that you can't then make money from the work that I put out. And so that's the idea. And where that's tricky for me is that even though the podcast itself is going to be free, if I do have a Patreon and the podcast is part of what I'm offering that people can support, even if it's indirect, you could still potentially argue that it's a commercial use. And so that's one tricky element. And so one of the other things that you can also do is that no matter what the license on the site says, you can contact the musician and ask for permission. And so, wow, I'm already over 5 minutes. And then I guess there's also just the element of just choosing what you want musically. And I was having trouble in my search for a while just because I had kind of a really specific idea in mind, and there's not a lot of music like that. And so it took me a while, but I found something that I wanted, and was the trick, is that the license on there allowed derivatives. It was share alike, meaning you just have to derivative works have to also be released with a Creative Commons similar license, right? But it did also say non-commercial. And so because it was a gray area, I decided to email the musician, and in this case he said yes. So that's great. I'm happy about that. And I felt like I had another point to go through there, but I've lost it now. So how about this? I'll talk to you guys tomorrow for 5 more minutes.